Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 607, recorded live on Sunday, August 2nd. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have Brandon. Welcome back, sir.
Hey Patrick, thank you very much for having me again.
Yeah. We like to talk about, screenshot. This week's screenshot is Ute declares herself the captain of the ship on the 474th screenshot of the week. Thanks for sending in this week's screenshot. I'm not exactly sure if I know where that is. I think it looks like the harbor, but I'm not positive on where in the harbor. It kind of has that look to it. But very nice screenshot nonetheless. Like the axe, I don't remember which one that is, but it has a very nice look to it. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOCast.com. And DDOCast is hosted by Cybrators, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend, and you can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or our website, DDOCast.com, with our calendar. On the podcast this week, we have part 3 of our Gearing Up discussion. So we'll be talking about that with Samius and a little bit with Arkat. A fun discussion. Part 3 of 5, so there's still more of that coming. We have some other, just the general stuff to go over. There's really not a whole lot of news, but that's what we're here for. Let's talk about the news. So we'll jump into the game news for what there was. And we'll continue talking about server instability, which seems to be mostly resolved. I haven't seen anyone from SSG necessarily declare victory, as it were, but we've gotten more information about it, and as far as I know, neither DDO or Lotro has really had days of server instability for, probably since last Tuesday, maybe even a week ago. It's all kind of melding together time-wise, but
for at least on Orion's side, it's been a lot better since the servers went down.
Yeah.
And it went back up, and since then it's been pretty much normal.
Yeah, so Cordovan posted, we apologize for the recent server instability that you have experienced as we work to resolve issues outside of our control in the data center and other environments. As an appreciation for your patience, you can redeem the following item using the code SOV2POT, SOV2POT, in the DDO store. That will get you a Sovereign 2 Experience Elixir, and that will be available through once per account through August 8th. So make sure you get that. That's 6 hours of 50% XP, so that's kind of nice. Additionally, they granted VIPs 2 days of time in addition to 150 points. That work has been done. I believe Lotro, they extended VIPs by 5 days and they gave them 250 points. Lotro had a much worse experience, which included significant downtime, or at least a fairly lengthy set of downtimes. So much worse than the DDO had. DDO never actually had servers go down. They never had to close anything. People just early on, people got booted with some annoying regularity. And then also, kind of aside from that, the server instability, which kind of manifested in terms of large moments of freezing, lag, and lag is probably the wrong word of saying it, but more of like you would disconnect, so you lose connection to the chat server and have that kind of a problem. Then it would reconnect and then kind of catch up and stuff. Players generally consider that to be lag, but I think it was a little bit more than that, kind of a little more specific to a connection issue, which is why I'm kind of going that direction. But so there we go. 2 days of VIP time if you're VIP plus. I think it was just VIPs, right? I don't think they did anything other than the experience elixir for free to play or premium players. So what do you think? Sufficient?
Yes and no. It's no, it's good, and I'm glad that SSG. I mean, the pot was a really good surprise. I mean that's brilliant. 50% for 6 hours. It's not even a 3-hour pot. I mean, it's 6 hours, so that's really good of them. 150 DDO points. I mean, that's just over a quarter of how many points you get a month, anyways. Um, 2 days bites my tongue a little bit. I'm a little unsure because we had, especially depending on your time zone, when the lag, because at least on Orion's side, I don't know about the other service, we had lag occur around the same time each day. Other than that, it was right before a good few hours. That's when DDO became nearly unplayable. And for some people, that's the only time they had allocated to the game. So
Sure.
they've had more than 2 days where they haven't been able to play. So I think that's a little, if you, but I mean, the potion and the DDO points, I think that's a brilliant thing they've done.
Yeah, the interesting thing here is that they still haven't really given us a good idea of what happened. This again, so they said it's issues outside of their control at the data center and other environments, uh, which kind of makes you think that it's a vendor of theirs. So either the data center, the data center itself that they contract with, or perhaps something that um, another vendor of theirs. My guess is that something changed in the vendor, and that had an impact on DDO that they then had to fix. So maybe some sort of IP thing changed, and DDO had to adapt to that or make changes to make that work. Um, Kind of my guess of reading between the lines, and I think Arcot and I were talking about it in DDOCast this week, and that was kind of something along what he was thinking. But in any case, that's what we're getting. I didn't really see anybody. I mean, it didn't look super hard, but I didn't really see anybody complaining about like this necessarily wasn't enough. But there you go. It was mostly just hey, great. And I think a lot of people didn't have. Um, I think they went above and beyond most people's experience.
That's very true.
I don't think very many people had an experience where they had 2 days of uh, their play just completely washed out or something like that. Even when I was having problems, it generally wasn't um, very long, right? Like it just kind of came in and out for brief moments. For a couple hours or an hour, it might be more prevalent or something like that. But
You
um,
must have had a very lucky pull of the straw. And there was times where we had hours where raids had to get cancelled on, like organized raids had to get cancelled. We were running,
sure,
my guild and I were running Legendary Hearts to Handle. They're like us right at the end. And so,
yeah,
but at least we experienced freezes that have gone on for minutes, and when the freezes fixed and you could play the game again, the chat server would be lost, so you wouldn't be able to type in party. You'd have to send tells. Eventually, say after 10 minutes, you'll get party chat back. But it was the few minutes made it quite hard. You could be running. Also, a mob catches up to you in that few minutes where you can't do nothing. You just have to pray and cross your
yeah.
fingers.
I would say that part of where that experience is coming from too is I wasn't I wasn't playing on hardcore during this time frame. If you were, bold choice, bold choice. So I didn't have any like negative experiences there. I mean, I did have a night where I said, I'm not doing raids tonight. It's not happening. Like it's just been really frustrating. I did log off a couple of times and go do something else for a while. But even then, like for me, it was like, all right, I'm gonna come back in an hour and see if things are better, kind of a thing. Um, so, but that was my experience.
That was pretty much the same my end as well.
So, the other news of note, a thread was started saying, "Hey, these fancy little gold roll horses that are bound to character. How about fixing that?" And Red Panda responded, "We'll look into this. Hey, look, we've got movement on this issue. This is fantastic." If you don't know what we're talking about, daily dice, you can get. There's a couple of horses within the daily dice, and they're bound to character. Uh, and it has been, shall we say, a sore point with players pretty much since people started rolling them. Like No, everybody wants to get. Nobody wants the dice to be bound to character because it really limits. You get one on um an example. I believe this was Arkat's story. He might correct me if I'm wrong, but he rolls on a specific character every day because he'd like to get a horse on that character. And the one day he didn't roll on that character, he got a horse.
Oh,
I think
that's
that was
unlucky.
Arkat. It might have been someone else on that's been on the show, but that's just kind of really depressing, right? Um, so and we actually talked about. I think we even kind of I pitched this idea of, well, hey, let's give us the ability to turn the horses into ingredients like you do the cosmetics, so we can turn them into horses on another character. If you can't change the bound to character part, um, but so anyways, it looks like we might get some movement here, which is fantastic. So those horses might become bound to account in the near future. So hey, don't throw them away. Hopefully you didn't, anyways, if you could avoid it. But they might become bound to accounts. You can give them to other characters, which would be kind of nice.
That
Um,
is really helpful for people who have many ults.
yeah, right.
I know people have over 20 ults, so that would be so helpful.
My solution with the horse problem was just to go get 5,000 favor in hardcore season 2, which is the reason why I did that.
Or free.
Problem solved. But not everyone has the time to do that, or wants to do that, or um, you know, is as persistent or as lucky or whatever in terms of surviving hardcore for 5,000 favor. Uh, so, there's probably people who don't even think that they can do it. I bet you could if you tried, with a little bit of luck and skill and some friends. But look, hey, not hardcore's not for everyone. Not everyone's interested in doing hardcore, and let's be honest, not everyone's great at hardcore. I mean, if you've been on hardcore very much, you've probably seen the same person die a few times in the same day, at least once or twice, right? Uh,
Last season, I actually did try to get the horse, but for that exact reason.
yeah,
Um, Unfortunately, at level 10, I got disintegrated by Beholden 1-2. At
that'll
that
happen.
point, I got too mad to re-roll the character.
That
It
can
was like,
also happen.
no, I reached level 8. I'm like a quarter, not even that away through. It's too much to catch up on.
Yeah.
Level 10.
In any case, it looks like there'll be another option for getting horses, and I'm sure if that becomes bound to account, we'll see a sudden spike in shard sales as people roll until they get a horse. I've known people who have done similar things, so wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me. The other part about this conversation that became interesting was there was that thread kind of turned into a bit of a petition to convert bound to character bound to account. So to basically do away with bound to character and open it up for bound to account, which I thought was an interesting push. Uh, in general, I would say I'm for it. These days, it seems like they want named stuff to be bound to account because they want you to actually run the content to get the named stuff, uh, which I think is a little unfortunate because I do like when that stuff can show up in the auction house. I do find that to be kind of entertaining, and it gives that a little bit more of a feel. I would say that the shard exchange and the auction house see a lot less use these days, specifically because there isn't anything to put in there that's quote named. Um,
But I
and
think the recent random gen loot update has helped that at least. That I'm seeing more like
yes,
augmented weapons, augmented armors, and some armors with the new stuff, so
sure,
with the old stuff. It seems to have actually done really well. So there's some life being brought back into it.
I would agree. Yes, um, but there's not an ability to use some of that other stuff, right? It's just not there, which is a little unfortunate.
Yeah,
I personally kind of like that. Um,
agreed.
the the thing with bound to character tends to really be confined to raids, um, and getting you to run that character in a raid. I'm not sure in today's world if it's really worth it to still have that be a bound to character thing. I mean, they have the wish of inheritance, and if you get to run bound to character completely, there's no reason to have wish of inheritance at all. I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad thing though. It's
Why
really a
do you
question.
think that, if you
Does
don't mind me asking?
what
Why do you personally believe it's not a bad idea to get rid of bound to character, if you don't mind me asking?
if it's a bad idea?
Why you think it's a good idea to get rid of bound to character?
Um, well, I can tell you, people. I don't know if I have a strong opinion on bounded character. I can kind
Yeah,
of see reasons to have bounded character and reasons not to have bounded character. I think the prevailing thought that I've seen expressed on the forums for the 5 minutes I perused through that thread was really about uh, if it's bound to account, it doesn't matter what character I run. I can just go and do the content and the raid and get what I want and give it to whatever character I want. Um,
I suppose that makes sense in a way. You know,
yeah,
instead of having to run, say, your tune that's half geared because the rest of the gear list left on the spreadsheet
right.
they have is raid gear. I guess in that sense they can still, put a little bit more, you know, effort into the raids. Well, not effort, but be more helpful in the raids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, say if you've got a melee who needs a con item from a raid, you want someone who's got high constitution, especially for some of the raids. And um, so I guess that part makes sense. But at the same time, a lot like when you're doing questing and that, say blown deadline, I farmed for my collective site, and I managed to make it in a way that it helps with any builds I tend to plan. And so for nowadays, from that point on, I've just been trading in a shared bank. I think
Right.
that's the issue. It makes at least some bounce character items, yes, I can understand, but stuff like raiding and that, as much as it gives players the opportunity to bring their best tune and contribute more into the raid, at the same time, it also, you know, raids may not be ran as much because people more are interested in loot than, say pushing difficulties or whatever. At least that's what I see.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
there's an interesting tension there, right? Because the bounded character encourages you to run it more because
yeah,
you can't switch it between characters after you get it. And I think things that encourage players to run raids more tends to be better. Um, I would say that maybe I think the better middle ground maybe with raids is to make the items bound to account and then bound to character on equip. So if you
yeah,
pull it out of the raid box, you can put it on any one of your characters you want. But once you put it on them, they own it. And you can't transfer it. That might be a better middle ground. I think if it's all just bound to account, you see raids probably get run a little bit less because instead of wanting to get this one item for 3 characters, you only need to get it once, and then you can pass it around depending on what build you're going with. So there's a little bit of a loss in rating there. But I do also kind of understand that the way that the game is now, the game has pseudily punished players for having more alts. What I mean by that is
yeah,
there's so much you can do to boost the power level of a character that by focusing on 1 or 2 characters, you're able to really amplify that. And you see a lot of players do that. Um, it's especially when you start talking about like higher end players and guilds and stuff. Most players in those guilds have 2 or 3 characters that they really focus on, and maybe another character or two that's kind of sort of kept up, but not nearly in the same power level as the first kind of quote tier of their characters. Um, so I think anything that we can do that kind of breaks that idea of playing more characters is harder to maintain and keep up, I think is better, right?
yeah,
But I think there's also somebody who said that I don't think you want raid loot, particularly because raid loot is more powerful, to just be able to be passed around indefinitely to your characters. So I think a bound to account, bound to character on equip is kind of catches both of those things. It allows you to help like run your better characters to help gear your other characters, which we can already do with the raid runes. Um, when I so I don't know. That's kind of where I think I land on the thing.
I think that's a brilliant idea because then you can still contribute more to the raid as well as helping your ult. So then that ult can contribute more when you want to run
Yeah,
your ult. So I think that's the best solution for it.
and I think it's always kind of a challenge. And again, this is more true back in the day in the past where people ran more alts before we had reincarnation and stuff. You can always run into this situation where we want to run this raid. Okay, well, someone needs to play a healer, but everyone's healer has everything they want out of the raid. There's nothing in there for a healer to run to get anyways. And I think that further kind of steps you away from that. And again, now you have the raid runes, which helps you get there. But I think where we're at now in today's, a little more leeway in that would be fine. And it still gives you a reason to have a wish of inheritance, right? Like if it's bound to character, uh, you can change it back to bound to account and move it again. Like it still works, of course. I mean, you still need to have wish of inheritance be available, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So
Yeah. And it also, I mean, especially for ults, you've got a lot to think of when you reach level 30 if it's a non-TRing tune. You've got your gear set with
mm-hmm.
raiding that. But on top of that, you also got other, bound character stuff, maybe a death ward clicky from Tangaroo, I believe, and things like that, all from White Plume Mountain. I mean, that's BTA. And also including like a Jack Jibbers, and we know how hard it is to farm for one of them. So I suppose with that, as you said, it will encourage more players to think, hold on, yes, I may be losing some Reaper points, but those are relatively easy to get back up. Fine, I'll roll up another character.
I'm okay with Jack Jibber's blade still being bound to character.
Oh, me too.
I mean,
I
it's
was just saying that you've got a lot to currently grind for. I mean, I stuff like that should stay bound to character because that's, it's too good to be bound to account. But I
there's
mean,
definitely
it
things that
just,
are worth being bound to character for.
yeah.
Um,
But maybe raid you can go to accounts, yeah, or
I
bound to character and equip.
artifacts could stay bound to character, right? Like that makes sense, and they're pretty easy to get anyways. So I think that's an example that works for bound to character pretty well.
Yeah,
But in general, I think I'm on board with the hey, let's make things more available than they are. You know, horses being bound to character from daily dice. Like, I don't really feel like there should be anything that's bound to character coming out of daily dice. Like that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
no,
It's really limiting in terms of what when you're doing dice and rolling and that kind of thing. It's kind of annoying more than it is fun. Um, I mean, it's fun until you get a thing that's bound to character. And it's like I don't want this bound to character thing on this mule. Just now I got to make every roll on a character that I want to roll it on, that I want maybe the bound to character thing on, and it becomes more of a chore, right? And that's not really great. So,
yeah, I can
um,
understand the Borden horse staying
mhm,
bound to characters because they're relatively easy to farm the feathers. But something like daily dice, it's
yeah.
as you said, it makes sense. You
And
could pull something
the
that's better on another character.
while we're on the topic of making things more available, I'm gonna get back on my soapbox. The sentient gem out of Strahd, and I would even say the gelatinous cube that you can get out of Caught in the Web. I think it shows up somewhere else, but I'm not sure if that's true. Like those really esoteric, like really rare things. Like put them in. Like let me buy them with raid runes or something. Like I don't care if it's more expensive than everything else. Just give me the option of getting it without
I have
having
never
to.
seen the sentient jewel drop.
I've seen it drop once, and I know 2 or 3 people that have it.
Ravenloft's been out for nearly 2 years. I have not seen it once. I've not even seen
Yeah,
someone link it in a chat.
I'm saying like why is this super rare thing only like I'm fine with it being super rare, but no, just put it in for raid runes for 5,000 raid runes. It's fine. I'll buy it. I'll go run the raid. Like I know people will go run that raid more to get 5,000 runes to get that sentient gem. Like it's gonna happen. Let's do this. All right. Um, uh, bonus days. Double daily dice, speaking of dice, through Sunday, August 2nd. That's today. So make sure you go get all those rolls in. Let's see. Store news. The sale is Rise again. 25% off of select reincarnation items, healing items, spell point potions, quest XP elixirs through August 6th. You can also get a free glamored weapon aura with the coupon code weapon aura through August 6th as well. And summer sales is over. And alas, Artificer was not part of summer sales. I'm very disappointed. It's the one thing I wanted to show up in there. Didn't happen.
You have Black Friday at least in a few months.
Well, December deals is usually
Yeah.
December deals in summer sales. Hey, if you're new and listening, you new or returning and you're back, just so you know, July is summer sales. So every week in July they have these big sales, and they do the same thing in December. December deals. So those are good times to look for things like that. I mean, the only reason I want to buy Artificer is so I can use it on hardcore. That's all. So, it's not necessarily necessary, but we'll see. Uh, Also, reminder: the coupon code DDO free quests to get adventure packs for your account through August 31st. So you still have a little bit of time for that, another month, but that will expire. So make sure you get that. And again, the Sov 2 pot through August 8th as well.
And for anyone who also plays Lotro, it's the exact same code, just instead of DDO, LOTRO, free quests, and you get all
Yeah.
content for free there as well.
Other than
Except from
expansions.
expansion packs as well, yeah. So except from them.
Let's see. Community news. The 391st Chronicle. The spotlight this week is the Ryan Discord is celebrating a year with a raffle. And Brandon, you are actually involved with this, are you not?
Yes, so the event was originally organized by Titus Ovid, who's an admin of the Ryan Raiden Discord, and he essentially got together two people to help him, Forsey and Talon, if that's how you say it. Together they realized, oh, we need another hand, so I came in to help. Essentially, after 1 year of running the Discord, we just wanted to celebrate, give back to the players. Today we actually celebrated 600 members in the Discord. And in order to do that, we decided to do a raffle. So we've set up a tune where you donate items to. His name's Raffle Hort. And at the end of August, we'll be doing raffles, and you can win many prizes from there.
Yeah. There's also we'll link to it the forum page directly. It's going on. So the weekend the raffle will be the last weekend of August, so the 28th through the 30th on the Orion Rating Discord. You do need to have a character on Orion and provide with the name when you win a prize. So, but it
Yep,
looks like a lot of fun, some great stuff. Hopefully, will be available there as well.
the raffle won't be conducted in game. You'll have to be part of the Ryan Raiden Discord.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you don't raid, it's also very good elsewhere. We have build discussion, we have LFM quests, or if you're trying to farm things. So it's good all round. It was primarily made for raiding. But yeah, if you're interested in joining or have any questions, please go join the Discord and just type in Hangouts. We'll get someone to respond.
Let's see. The comment for the week: what character enhancements would be best if they applied in a food fight? I'm gonna say accuracy stuff. Anything that improves your accuracy, because throwing food, depending on the food you're using, is not always easy, right? Like a lot of food's not really aerodynamic. When you start adding in range distances, it makes it a little harder. So I'm gonna go with accurate, something for accuracy.
To be honest, I'd either go for blood tribute because foods can hurt, so I'd like a little more health too, so I don't get hurt by what food. You can think someone could be throwing, a hard potato or watermelon at me, or they could be throwing a bit of bread. You don't know, and I don't want to be prepared. Or I want to go for like swashbuckling, and hopefully it'll be the same as like a throwing dagger again. Other two crit range, deal more damage if I'm throwing something to them.
Wow, that's I'm not sure what kind of food fights you get in. This sounds kind of cutthroat food fights here, man. Fan site news.
Last man standing.
DDO players news. could have been at Gen Con. Instead, you can listen to their newest show. Yes, Gen Con was supposed to be this weekend. Gen Con Online is happening. I'm gonna guess that it's much less well attended than Gen Con would have been had there not been a pandemic going on. But such is life. We got a shout out for our discussion, our episode last week talking about gearing up. DDO Stream is your first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week, D&D Night goes into the unknown. That was the classic D&D night, I believe. Sig Trent uncovers the truth about the festival jester, and Brock and Friends gets echoey. Also on Twitch, Miss Serenity stays alive on an Artie. Dark Crusader streams on Orion, and Herc returns. I'm just gonna say on the Herc returning, I believe I saw an LFM. I think it was on the hardcore server, but the LFM was Herc Smash, which I greatly found quite amusing. It was a nice LFM. Over on YouTube, Pine Leaf Needles plays an alchemist, Voodoo Spice gives a tutorial on Inferno of the Damned, and Cam Dragon records a world first, Too Hot to Handle.
Yep. You also do have Strim Tom, who started a build where he's only throwing sun flasks, which
Yeah.
is quite interesting to watch. I was watching it. I would
Woof.
never imagine someone doing it, but here he is doing it. So good luck to him.
Yeah. Sunflies actually kind of used to be a fun thing to do with wolf form or bear form, because you would get the benefits of the effect on your weapons for attacking. So it made it really great against oozes and undead, particularly at low levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting build. Voodoo Spice also did and I'll give a shout out. He did a tutorial for the pit as well. And DDOCast actually has episodes in the past. I started doing a couple of quest tutorials, and then I ended up kind of stopping doing it, mostly because it was a really it was a heavy editing process, which I kind of try to avoid in general. But you can check that out if you want. If you're looking for the Inferno of the Dam and the Pit, are I think two quests that people really get lost in easily. Another one would be Mirror Darkly, through Mirror Darkly. Although I think that one less so than the others. But
There's actually a really good map on the wiki for it. It doesn't have directions up, but it's got on the wiki. It's got a picture where it shows both floors, and the mirror locations on both floors. So if anyone's unsure, this is the way how I learned. So I just looked on the wiki. You have the pictures of
right.
where the orbs are. You just make your way to each of them.
The big thing that makes Mirror a lot easier than Inferno of the Damned is Mirror you can switch sides wherever you want. Inferno of the Damned you have to get to specific points to switch sides, right? Which can be more problematic if you don't know it. But yeah, if you're looking for help on doing those quests, Voodoo Spice has some tutorials up for that, so it'll be great. Let's see, D&D Night on DDO Stream Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/DDO Stream. This week is On the Edge of Evil. The week after that will be something that I'll do, probably Stormreach Chronicles, stuff like that. But that's still happening. And DDOCast on most Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time on twitch.tv/DDOcast. That's the static group that I'm in. We will probably not have an episode this week because I'll have other things happening that day, but you can check that out as well. Let's see. Lightning Post. Got a couple comments in. Started talking about gearing up. Musky Ellen said that Ravenloft and Slaver sets are best for flexibility. The Sharn sets are a pain unless you are Warforged. I don't really agree with that. I think Sharn sets are great for anyone. I don't think they're...
sets do have Warforged versions of them.
They do.
And even say like the part of the family set, the Warforged variants of the armor, that still has stuff like the healing amp, I believe, on it, which is really useful because
I
as a
believe all of the docents have repair amplification, not healing amplification. So the general consensus that I've seen is that it's actually more of a pain if you're a Warforged because repair amplification is less useful than healing amplification. And in fact, on a Warforged, most people would argue that healing amplification is more useful on a Warforged than your average character, since they're starting from starting behind everyone else anyways. Um, but slaver sets, and I'll say especially in terms of hardcore, uh, slaver the slaver stuff can be really handy there because one run um, through the slave lords, especially if you kind of pool the ingredients, you can get an item with a skill boost on it. If you're a trapper or something, that can be really handy. I did it as a tank for intimidate. So there's some pretty nice things that you can get in heroic that really amplify you on hardcore. Um, and I would say that the skill flexibility is probably the one that's most useful. You can put a stat on it, a little bonus to a stat on it too, but that's a little easier to find as some of those stat bonuses, other than the quality ones. But he also says, Muskie says red fens are wonderful, and I believe we talked about that in one of the later parts of the discussion. Smoker8 says he disagrees about Wish of Inheritance. Raid gear is bound to character for good reason, and people should be incentivized to pass it if they can't use it on that specific character. Imagine having to drop the raid item you need on your name as a semi-casual player that won't be grinding 20 completions efficiently. It feels bad to see the Sork take the SOS you want for your Barbarian because you need it for a TR. Now it could also be used for an alt. Guilds might still have internal rules about looting. The more casual player will basically never ever get raid gear this way, and they won't take long to realize it, and that's bad for the game.
That's actually a very fair point that we actually didn't think about how, you got things like raiding and that's sorry, rolling. And there's a good point because if you can get something for an alt, right now, I have my tunes. I have two tunes. I have one who's a thrower, one who's a melee. So I pull one on my thrower, and I know, if I don't pull a thrower bit of loot in a raid, then I know not to. I'll not give up for a roll to someone else. But I suppose in a way that takes away the element if you had the changes of being bound to character and equip. It takes away the whole, oh whoops, this isn't for my tune, it's for the other tune.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else take it, and it's true for someone who doesn't raid often. Um, and it makes it harder for them to pull because instead of relying on like a guild who say if you run as a guild you may push the difficulty up a little bit more, so increase chances. It makes it a lot harder for them if they've just say got out LFM done possibly lower difficulty or maybe the same. It makes it harder.
So
And if I was a barbarian and who needed a SOS and a sorcerer pulled it, I would be quite upset and bite my tongue to say the least.
sure. So here's my sense on this: is that while yes, everything that's being said here there is an element of that. It is not as big of an issue as people who tend to bring it up think it is. That's my experience. Um, like we started having this problem with reincarnating, and there was a whole bunch of cries and warnings that people will never be able to get the stuff they want. People will get it for all of these TRs and stuff. And yes, that does happen. Uh, but it's not as pronounced as you think it is. Most people who raid particularly start talking about a guild that raids. A lot of times they're gonna keep raiding even after they get the stuff that they want. And
True.
uh, I think that how much if you were to make raid gear bound to account, either the way that our site would bound account and then it becomes bound to character when you equip it, or it was just bound to account. Would people take more stuff for themselves? Yes. And I would be one of them. However, I do not think that that is actually going to have a major impact in the ability for people to get raid loot. Um, because guilds will still run raids. Um, it's a guild experience, and I think while loot is part of it, people just like doing raids. And what ends up happening a lot of times is a guild, a group of people, whether it's a guild or a couple of guilds or whatever, they start running a raid, and over time they get the stuff they need, but they keep running it, and every time that they run it, they create an opportunity for people who are not in that circle to go and run the raid and possibly get that stuff. And over time, what you can see happen a lot is uh, those people who aren't in that group actually sort of see their chances go up a little bit because stuff drops and everyone in the group already has it, and those people who don't necessarily run it as often might have a better chance of walking away with a piece of gear. Um, the short version of what I just said is yes, there will be some short term issues there, but I think if you take it from a long term perspective, uh, you would end up having an easier time because there would be more rating. And if there's more rating, more people get what they want and help other people get what they want, particularly in their social circles. So there's more raids happening, which gives you it gives you more opportunities to get that, right?
One other
So,
thing, at least from what I've noticed, in a lot of raids, there's generally, I mean, not in every raid, but there's been quite often, I say most of the time, there's an unwritten rule that a lot of players tend to follow, that they don't really take loot if someone else is needing it. You
right.
know, around that time, say if you're thinking for another life, a lot of players, at least there's unwritten where I've seen people, follow it. There's, if they need it for another life, they'll give it to, say, safety pool flow. And they think, I'll use it for one of my builds in a few lives' time. If there's a ranger who needs it, Tempest, I've seen at least most of the time they've actually passed it
Mhm.
because the people aren't as selfish as you think. The
Yeah,
communities are
I agree.
lovely, and
Yeah, I don't think people are selfish as people are afraid they are. Um,
but you can understand where Smoke is
yeah.
concerned. It's a very valid point. It's a win and a loss.
Well, like I said, I think that the underlying fear there or expectation is correct short term. But I think that the long term, if you think about it from a long term perspective, there would be more raids. People would be able, you get outside of this problem of, well, we don't really have a healer this run because no one wants to run their healer because everyone needs something on a different character. Uh, so you allow groups to um, you allow groups to be better tailored to the challenge at hand, which increases your completions and your level of difficulty, uh, which gives you more raid rooms, which makes it easier to get stuff. And look, this is something that already exists to a lesser extent. So I don't think it's as big of a concern as Smoker does. That's not to say that what he's saying is not valid. I mean, it is a thing that will happen. I just think that my experience when I look at we like this was the same thing that was brought up with TRing, that people were going to
Yeah.
take raid loot that they didn't need because it was going to be for a life that they were going to do in 2 years. And what I have seen, uh, and I think a lot of other people I think have seen, is does that happen? Yes. Does that hurt the raiding community? No, it actually amplifies it because those people run the raid more because they're looking for more stuff. So you have that short term impact that's negative, but the positives in the long term are much greater. Moving on, Johan says, in his opinion, gear sets are bad game design. They remove both gear choices and build variation. At most, they should have made two-piece sets, and they should always conflict with each other in at least one slot. Also, very bewildered that medium armor is still in its sorrowful state. It's either evasion or heavy armor. There is simply no incentive to use medium armor, or at least I have found none. Okay, so there's two things there. Set bonuses. I think this. I don't think set bonuses are a problem. Uh, I think a set bonus is the same as any other piece of gear. When it's so good that everybody has to get it, That's the problem. It's not that it's a set bonus. The problem
But
is
that is where we currently are.
right.
I mean, that is there's the set bonus isn't something small. It's not an
Yes,
additional con or additional strength. It's to the point now where you talk about another 15% double strike for part of the family. That's crazy.
it's a huge bonus, and it's to the point where if you're swinging anything and you don't have that set, I think objectively we can all just say you're wearing the wrong gear because 15% is a huge bonus, and I think
And
that's the issue with the gear sets. Sets themselves are not bad game design. They just made them too good and they made them essential.
and on top of that, I think, if I'm being completely honest here, when someone joins my party or, say a raid or whatever, and I'm checking out the bio, checking out, the buffs, etc. And when you notice that they don't have, say, Woolwich set or Power Family, you are sat there thinking for a second, hmm. And I think that element should be taken out in a way. I mean, say if you notice someone's got a set, it should be nice to go that set. I don't, but
Yeah,
don't it doesn't mean anything. Because right now, you can, in a way, sort of judge players for having sets or not. I mean, not judge, but you
yeah,
can
no,
you form an
it's
opinion on their skill level where that shouldn't happen.
yeah. I mean, the sets are so good that if you don't have them, people are gonna look at you like, why don't you have them in your gearing? Like,
Yeah,
and I think that's the problem, right? And it's not like I said, it's not about the set. It's about how good it is, and you can say the same thing about other pieces of gear, right? Like if you don't have this piece of gear, you're doing this, you're carrying this build wrong. That's a thing that happens. It's unfortunate.
the
Um,
only thing I can understand that with is with weapons. There's always going to be a best weapon, regardless of your class. There's going to be a weapon that's best fit for what you're planning. But
you
the
think that?
the
I
gear
don't know if it's true.
Tetris should be open. You should be able to select whatever you want instead of having to follow this exact path.
I mean, I think weapons they've actually done a pretty decent job, and in gearing
Yeah,
in general, I think they've done a pretty decent job. Because there are, you can look at weapons and say that, oh, well, this one has the most DPS. Well, this one you're going to lose a little bit of DPS, but you get guard breaking, which is going to make you more survivable
yeah.
because it'll interrupt monsters attacking you. And so there's some trade offs there that are pretty good.
Yeah.
Problem with sets is, I think it really started with Ravenloft, is those sets were too good. And if you didn't have them, you were clearly building wrong. And then Sharn made it better or worse, depending on which way you're looking at it, right? Like, um, so that's kind of the problem
I
there.
can, sorry.
Um,
I can understand why there's these sets and why they're so good because it's part of the marketing experience. For a player
yeah,
who maybe said it's more casual, they don't think, oh, I'll wait and get this with turbine points, sorry, DDO points, and that doesn't make the SSG their money. They make the money from when people buy it from the market, unless they buy points in game. And so I can understand why, say, for characters not really as interested in content, maybe interested in building their character up to be stronger, it makes sense to have the sets and have them give a good boost. And that's probably why it's so high because there's people, we look at loot and we think, wow, when Sean was kind of, these sets look awesome. We straight away hopped on and planned our gear sets when it came out. And I think that's part of the marketing for it. But it
yeah.
shouldn't be to the point where, you know, it gets to the point where you're judging people, bear in mind if they have a set or not. It shouldn't be that. 15% double strike is huge.
Even
And,
without the
and
judging
I'm,
other people, right? Like it limits our choices because it does remove gear choices because it's so good, right? Like that's the problem.
yeah,
I will say that it says they should always conflict with each other in at least one slot. Um, I disagree. You don't need them to conflict in slot because you can make them conflict in bonus. And we're actually seeing that, right? Like the sets use the same tend to use the same bonus. It's usually an artifact bonus, so it doesn't stack anyway. So it doesn't. I don't think we need them to conflict in slot. They just need to not stack, right? Like there's clearly
yeah,
if the Ravenloft tank set and the Sharn tank set stacked, that would be problematic. That would only
yeah,
amplify the issue of not choosing, right? Like if you could wear both of them and you were tank, you would obviously wear both of them. They're both good, and then you're out of slots already. So, as far as incentive to use medium armor, um, that I don't think that it's true that there's no incentive to use medium armor. The medium armor is not in a sorrowful state, and heavy armor is better, but if you can only wear medium armor, that's still probably better than light armor, simply because going to medium armor raises your
MR.
MRR cap, which is going to be a big deal. Um, and a lot of builds actually don't have heavy armor proficiency. The difference between medium armor and heavy armor is actually pretty small. I would say that it's much smaller than light to medium, because the big difference there is you get a little bit more PRR, which is based on your base attack bonus and the armor that you're wearing. Um, so you're not going to get a huge boost from medium to heavy. I think there's actually very little difference between the medium and heavy armor. What I find these days is more informative of what armor you wear tends to be what set you're using, right? Like that's gonna use it. Someone in the Cerebron in the chat is pointing out that medium armor usually has more dodge. Yeah, I mean that's another way of going at it. There's a lot of barbarian builds out there. Barbarian's really popular. They're wearing medium armor unless they take a feat to wear heavy armor. So I don't think medium armor is in a bad state. Let's see. Dusk of the Dead says he agrees totally, thinks the game has gone crazy with bound named items in general, as well as sets, considering we have two major systems for getting gear, random loot, gen, and crafting. Would much rather that the number and slot power of named items in the game be much lower, so that we see a few of them worked into everyone's build, alongside unique, great random gen and great crafted gear. Seeing all blue names in every slot makes the game feel more and more like World of Warcraft. That's the trick, right? Like getting you want named loot, random loot, and crafting to all kind of exist in this same world. So I think name loot needs to be a little better than random loot and crafted loot, because
Yeah.
named loot drives people to run content. Sorry, named loot drives people to run specific content. I don't.
I think alongside that, at least with the kind of crafting side of it, you should be able to. I think there should be like it's like sort of a three tier system where named items your best. Then you got your random loot gen should be second best, and crafting last but not least. I think crafting needs, you know, a bonus currently right now. Shang is plus 22 to a stat, whereas crafting I believe is only plus 17, and
Sounds right.
things like it needs more love to it. But at the same time, sort of what we said previously with sets, the difference between each level of names to loot gen to crafting shouldn't be as big as it is now.
Yeah.
There should be some times where we see an item, we think it's a random loot gen. We gotta sit there for 10 minutes on the spot thinking, should I put this in, should I not? And then it gets to the point where you test out with either of them to make up a choice. I think it should get to that level, but not to the point where, instead of me farming a quest for an item, to when me just playing whatever content and hoping to get good loot gen. I think that's where that should be the limit.
Yeah. And I'll just throw in here too that I think that one of the things that he kind of misses in terms of major system in terms of gearing is augments, which we've talked ad nauseum on the show about how that system is way too far behind, right? So I think the relationship between random loot, crafting, and name loot is generally better than it's been throughout the history. I think crafting needs to be updated a bit. Um, I would like to see some of the special abilities be able to be put on crafting, um, like the two ability kind of thing. Like, I can't think of any right now. But give crafting a little bit more of a and bring its level up to kind of the same progression as random loot. And then don't let named loot completely outpace random loot, and I think you're there. And then it's just a matter of maintaining. The problem is that I
Yeah.
think we're kind of the name loot gets better, and then the random loot gets better, gets closer to that, and then the crafting loot gets closer to that, and then we kind of keep doing this cycle. And if you keep that maintained thing a little better, it all works better together. But I think name loot needs to be at the top just because that drives people to run content, And you can look at content that people don't want loot from, and they don't run it. No, a lot of times it has to do with do they like the content or not. But writing the storm out is a great example. The loot in there wasn't really sought after by a lot of people. It was a raid that people didn't like to run, and so people didn't run it. Too hot to handle. People don't really like running that raid in general, but they want the loot, so they run it.
That's very true. I actually personally, I love Two Hot Handle, but there's so many people who don't like it. If you go onto like, the DDO Discord and stuff like that, people, say it's too hard, it's too, or they don't like how, the puzzles in it, but it's still very commonly ran.
Yeah.
And that needs to be maintained, as you said. It's just with every update, as you said, with the maintaining, there's got to be the selling point with each expansion every year. If say next year's expansion, if there's one next year, then the loot needs to be better to the point where that's going to be part of the reason why I want to buy it, not just
Mm-hmm.
for the content, because I mean that's the reason why I buy it anyways. But there's also going to have to be a farming element, because otherwise I'll run through it once, decide if I like it or not, and that's it. End of the day. Um, and so the loot has to be better. But at the same time, when you're upping the loots and these set bonuses and that, well, hopefully for level 32, which I believe is coming this year, they tweak sets a little bit. But they also need to put more work in to make sure that the new loot gem, especially kind of crafting, doesn't get left behind, because that's where it currently is. I kind of craft up to level 10 to Ravenloft gear, and then after that, there's very few times I kind of craft, especially not at level 30 because it's so far behind. So for
Yeah.
each expansion of these new sets, they need to do a little side boost. PS, we also upped kind of crafting, sort of. Maybe say we got level 30 power level 1 to 4. I mean, with say once level cap goes to 32, maybe they could do the same thing, because at least my guess is we'll be at level 32 for a little while. So if each time there's been a slight boost, in the gear, maybe they can add another power level. So in that way, you've got to grind out. So it's not just again free loot worth using. You've still got to grind out the kind of crafting levels. But for each these new power levels at these new level caps to be a little more up to date, a little more, it gives a better reason to also grind kind of crafting as players who
Mm-hmm.
haven't bothered learning about it, which you can understand why.
Yeah, I think the thing that they really need to focus on, I think for me, is I don't think we need power creep in heroics. We're already plenty powerful in heroics,
Nope.
right? Uh, which means the scaling that we have right now is in a good place. Now you could, I think you could go back and maybe update some of the old named items, which they've been doing, and that would be fine. But get the crafting system to be. I think the scaling for name should be slightly higher than the scaling for random loot, which should be slightly higher than Kenneth crafting. And the one that's really lagging behind is Kenneth crafting.
See,
That's what's lagging right now. And my guess is they'll probably work on that now that they've finished random loot.
hopefully.
And hopefully after that they'll get augments to be. I think augments should probably be in the same scaling, about the same scaling as named loot. Not named loot. Crafted, the crafting system. So a little couple steps below like the named loot level, and then I think you just in you know the scaling stuff doesn't need to go really higher too much. You just kind of find new ways to kind of introduce different things and different combinations and maybe some new stats or something that works. But we don't need to go crazy with the scaling, especially since you have a whole bunch of different ways you can do things. Right? Like we've got different bonus types. You can use just introduce different bonus types. You're not messing with your scaling. We don't need to increase. Oh, here's new level 26 loot that is 4 ability plus 4 to what already exists in the world. You don't need that. Just maybe it's like one higher, but really just give us more insightful or insightful, quality, exceptional. Like that's hardly used at all. Insight, profane. I mean, there's a lot of different bonus types that you can throw in there without breaking the scaling system that already exists.
The the way how I see it is, as if you're a caster, say for example a nuker, you are so excited to reach level 10 in heroics.
Mhm.
There's not one thing. Once, if I'm a sorcerer, say an alchemist, there's not anything on the world that makes me happier than reaching level 10 because of, say, the Burn Scar Sash or the
Yep.
electricity and ice one, because they've got the enhancement bonus or equipment, one of two. I forgot which one. Sorry, but it got this bonus that no other item has, and from that, it really boosts up your character. They should do something with camp crafting where maybe being able to craft something like that, the boosts that you have in the Ravenloft items, would help, because the whole point of reaching level 10, God, just wait till I reach level 10. We've all joked about that once or twice. That should be taken out, where level 10 you've got an increased stuff, and even level 15 you're stronger, but also doing harder content, so it plays in hand. As you the power creep is too much currently, and once they go over augments and crafting, it'll be a lot better.
Yep. We're close. Just need a few little tweaks. Well, hey, we've turned about 15 minutes of news into an hour worth of discussion. So we're gonna close out the show. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Brandon for joining me today. Anything you
Thank
want
you for
to
having
plug?
me. I mean, to be honest, I was gonna plug the Discord, but we spoke about that. It's just a little reminder to everyone: if you're part of Orion, please, even if you're not interested in it now, have any suspicions or questions, please feel free to ask. You can contact myself, Type Solvid, Forcistus, or Talem in game, or on forums, or on the Discord. Discord's probably easiest, and we'll be happy to answer everything. It's, we're celebrating, and we'd like to have everyone included, or as many people as possible.
Yep. Well, hey, thanks also to the other contributors for DDOCast, especially to Samius and Arkat for the discussion that's coming up for Gearing Up Part 3, and to Sandstone Games, Wizards of the Coast, and to Cyber Ears for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOcast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage where you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. And you can hit us up at DDOcast.com for our show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. And if you'd like to be part of the show, or if you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, or a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates at DDOcast on Twitter is the best place. So stay tuned for part 3 of our Gearing Up discussion. All right, we are back with part 3 of our ongoing discussion about gearing up. I have a blast here with we've got Arcot.
Hola.
And Samius Gurobo.
Greetings and salutations, everyone.
And this is part 3. Like I said, we've been talking about gearing up, kind of specifically gearing this discussion, or trying to do a discussion towards kind of new and returning players, because that's a big part of the DDO environment right now. But also this applies to people who've been here forever and are still playing. It was like we've been saying a couple times, right? Gears is the thing about our characters that changes probably the most frequently in terms of the game structure. In terms of it's every update we get new stuff and whatnot. So, all right, we're gonna talk a little bit about reincarnation and how that how it changes gearing up when we're talking about gearing towards reincarnation. And Samus, I think last time you mentioned like this is your bread and butter. So why don't you kick us off? How does gearing change for you when you're talking about it from a reincarnation perspective?
So I mentioned it, I think, 2 weeks ago now, that for me, it really comes down to I've analyzed where it is that I've had fun in Dungeons and Dragons, and for me, it's the Skinner button is gaining level, and what that means is what it is that you get pleasure from. So for me, when I'm going and leveling, I like to look. I like to look at my TR bank. I like to just look at my TR cache. I like to kind of examine. Now that they added the search window or the search level range, that really makes a big difference. Um, so for me, I have a pretty much maxed out shared bank with just oodles and oodles of miscellaneous gear in it. So for me, because I also switch not just races relatively often because I'm working through my past live races right now. But I always switch my build. I don't do the same build twice in a row almost ever. So like for example, my last 3 lives, I think I did a pure favorite soul caster. Right now I'm on a warlock bard tank type build, and before that I did some other. I think I did a great sword fighting a melee. I think it was a their fighter or paladin. So like I change my play style and what I do every single time. Now, if I was a normal person and not somebody who's been here for 13 years and have collected all this miscellaneous gear, right? And didn't like go to the TR cache and be like, "Oh, it's level 7. What do I have at level 7 that I may or may not want to use?" If I was a normal person, what I would do is I'd plan out kind of how it is I'm going to try to motivate through my levels, right? So again, I mentioned play style. Do I want to be ranged? Do I want to be a caster? Do I want to be melee? Or maybe even 2 different types of things. Like I pick 2 of them. Like some lives I'll be ranged and some lives I'll be melee or whatever. However it is you like to encapsulate a little bit of variety. And then what I would do is I would start collecting gear as I go through my quests that apply to those different styles. Um, so, like for example, if I'm going to be mostly ranged focused, right? I would pick up the Keep on the Borderlands crossbow at level 2 and have one of those in my bank ready to go. I would maybe augment it or put uh, ritual it up in some way, something like that. Or I would craft a special one. Right now, with the random loot changes that they just had, you might find an incredibly sweet crossbow. You might find something that's like, I don't know. Let's just pull out complete Fantasyland. It might be like Vorpal of some sort of good damage with two augment slots. Like you could just have this insanely powerful thing kind of fall into your lap, but if you're not paying attention with the idea or the potential eye towards a TR, you might just get rid of it.
Right.
So especially right now with this random loot gear change, you might keep an eye on your low level stuff as your TR. And what you just do is you just kind of collect all these random things that are kind of good along the way, and here and there, and occasionally you farm something up. Like again, I mentioned if you're ranged and you're this crossbow build, maybe you take a life and you do 1 or 2 passes of Thrinal to make sure that you get your rat catcher. Maybe you don't use your rat catcher all the time, but maybe you use that rat catcher from level 9 to level 18 for most of the monsters. And then you pick up your Barovian crossbow at 10, and maybe you use that for certain sets of the monsters. And then maybe you pick up a Ravenloft one, and you kind of juggle as the situation goes about. But then you have 3 different weapons at your disposal that have 3 very different powerful effects. Big crits, really good at destroying undead, and then have the ability to crowd control. Like all 3 of those things kind of plug in together with 3 pieces of named gear that come along line. As you're progressing through the tree. So you get all these different things going for you, and you have this really interesting opportunity to like switch into and fill in different holes as you're TRing and leveling up. For example, I literally just took level 6, which at level 6 turns on all of these named hats from the Memories quest, and it's like, man, this is really insane that I can, right now my character, even though I'm a bard and I'll be charisma to damage, I'm still using my strength to hit. And I'm kind of struggling with not hat. Wow, I'm getting really sweet on the screen. I'm really struggling with like hitting things sometimes. So I can use that hat slot to adjust my to hit by putting in that strength hat. Or if my DPS is a little low, I can put in the Dexterity Hat, which does an extra D6 points of poison damage. So like you have these different things that you can just kind of like, because you have them already available, you can kind of put in. At level 6, I talked about the hats. At level 7, you have the little sets from Red Fins. At level 9, you have all the sweet gear from White Plume Mountain. So like all this different stuff, because you have it around and because your focus for so long has been like, let's just gather things up and throw it in the TR bank. And you can kind of tighten things up even though you have this core set of gear that your main focus is, because I'll generally be a crossbow user, or I'll generally be a melee. And you can just kind of like, oh man, for this particular situation, I'm a little bit weak. What do I have?
Yeah, I think I want to kind of throw in a little nugget here too, because we're talking about reincarnation, and I don't want to miss this in terms of, we're talking about kind of trying to talk towards new returning players too, that a lot of the same theory is going to apply even if you're just a brand new character and you're not really planning to reincarnate just from leveling up. Same is kind of generally true of hardcore. We've kind of talked a little bit about how hardcore has this extra consideration of a risk factor of death that
Well,
live servers
I would
don't.
even say that
But
what I just said even applies more to
Sure.
hardcore than it does to just regular server play,
yeah,
because you do have such a strong likelihood too of death, and the penalty is so strong that that gear is gone. So quality gear that comes across your path, or gear that you've taken the opportunity to get along the way, becomes even more important for the next character, so you can
Yeah.
proceed further than you were before.
yeah, that's absolutely true. But what I was kind of trying to get at is this idea that, at least for me, when I think about gearing up for levels 1 to 10, especially, right? Because, and we'll talk about why 10 is kind of this major watermark and benchmark. But it really kind of comes down to this idea that I am not gonna spend a lot of my playtime at these levels, right? Like you start to kind of cruise through these levels a lot, so there's not really a need to go crazy and get the optimal gear farm. My approach has always been, each iteration through, I just kind of pick stuff up, and it's a lot less frequent these days. But early on in that kind of TRing process, you'd be like, oh, I got this item, I'm gonna throw that in. That's gonna become part of my TR cache, right? Like the stuff that I'm gonna pull out when I come past that life, right?
I feel like you'll be released, at least for me, from my point of view, especially if you're in the continuous TR grind.
Yeah.
You'll actually find how often certain pieces of gear you lean on really heavily, because they just are that important.
Yeah.
Again, I mentioned it several shows ago, but the Bracers of Wind at level 3, that's like the most important piece of gear you can get if you're on the TR train. It's something I basically have to talk myself into switching out of at level 10 to put on a Ravenloft set, because you get permablur.
Yeah.
Permablur at level 3, that's insane. That is absolutely bonkers for someone who's going to spend, again, you don't spend 1,000 hours between level 1 and 10, but if you TR once a week or twice a week, or let's say it once a month, I think that's very easily accomplishable for a lot of new players coming back. If you TR once a month because you're on the TR train, that means you're still going to be spending probably something like 40 hours where this is applicable. And if you're spending that much time with a 20% miss chance, that saves you a ton of time just being able to live to get to the next. Same thing with I talked about the Mimic Belt and the Mimic Cloak. Same thing. You're talking about 5 DR from the cloak. You're talking about a ton of hit points from the belt. You got fortification. You hopefully have an empty gear slot, so you can either have a gem of the gift of the master, or more importantly, a voice of the master, or the cloak of the world mantle. We haven't even talked about how it affects your experience points yet.
We'll get there. Yeah,
like all these
kind of where
these things are factors.
Kind of what I was driving at, though, is this idea of, like, as opposed to, we were talking about endgame gearing, and there's kind of more of a focus of getting these things, right? My approach for reincarnation and this gear is, this gear is going to radically and fundamentally improve my experience in being able to go through these levels. But I'm also, like, I don't feel it. each life, I'm not going to be spending a whole ton of time there. And so my approach to getting the gear and kind of making that gearing changes is more of I run this quest. An example would be the boots from kind of a big deal, right?
Right.
Like I didn't spend a whole lot of time. Uh, like I didn't go in there one life and run the quest 5 times, right? Every life I ran through it and eventually I got it. That's kind of been my gearing approach. That's kind of was.
I think we're missing. I think we're missing because I agree with you. I would say for 80% or 90% of your TR and gear, your philosophy is 100% right. The problem is that there's going to be 3 or 4 pieces of gear that
That
are
you're
going to
gonna
come
want.
out of it that you're going to want, and they're
Yeah.
important, and you want them. You want them, and you want them every time, and they are important that you grind through. Again, the bracers, the mimic
Yeah.
stuff. Those are pieces of gear that you absolutely positively want to
Want to
have
get.
access to a large portions of your TR lives. Those are the 3 big ones. But when the anniversary event runs around or the cove comes back, you're gonna want you're gonna want that dagger. That dagger, I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head, but it's got disruption at level 4. Like that's something that you may not think that you need because I play ranged. I'm fine, but you're gonna need it. you know,
Eventually.
Yeah, it's the same thing with
Yeah.
like the Maybar event. The Maybar event's probably going to. We might have the code before the Maybar, but I think we'll have the Maybar as our next big event.
I think
You
Cove for talking
need
like a
to
pirate
do
stuff,
that.
but
Yeah, but you need to take time to carve out time to farm that stuff up. You're going to want those Ghost Touch gems. You're
yeah.
going to want that the Int and the Wisdom augment gem at some point. Maybe you don't want them now, but
Yeah.
you especially those limited time events. You want to take the time to do the work on them. You want to take the time during a challenge weekend to get those bracers um, to help reduce the amount of extra grinds that you want to do. You're going to want to do these things if you're serious about getting the TRs. You're going to get your
Yeah.
completionist. You're talking about 13 lives, right? If only one is completionist, I think there's 13 right now.
Sounds
Like
right.
that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of lives. And what if you want to do that on 2 characters? Or what if you want the triple completionist?
Or if you
Like
just want just racial completionist is what?
it's a
Almost 40
million.
lives?
48 I think, and then we're about
Um
to get shifter,
yeah.
right?
Yep. There's a
So
lot of
like
lives out
all
there
these,
to get.
right, exactly.
So
So if you go on that train, you may not use them that much on a particular given life,
right.
but you're going to use them so many times over and over and over again that the grind to get those items are going to be
Yeah, so one of the things that where I was kind of trying to drive at though was this idea that especially from a perspective of of kind of tying it back to you're just gonna go from 1 to 30 and then sit there is and with the idea of doing a successful reincarnation is 2 to a certain extent is don't stress too much about that gear from 1 to 10 range, right? Like you'll be perfectly fine picking up what you find along the way and kind of going with it. Yes, obviously, if you're doing these lives, a life every week or every month, like you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck if you kind of pick that stuff up along the way as well, though.
right. I mean, again, I'm not trying to disagree. I
Yeah,
want to make sure that people realize how important these outliers are. The outliers in particular are going to be the thing. Um, like right now, it's something that has been mentioned in the chat. Slay Living for the first time ever is now level 3. So it's very easy if you keep an eye out that you could pick up a level 3 Slay Living item
hmm
that you can easily work in. That could that could very quickly become a must-have piece of gear at all the times.
many years
Um,
ago, it was Vorpal started showing up on level 2 items.
there's some level 1 Vorpals floating around,
Yeah,
and maybe that's something that you like want to make sure that you have access to.
man,
And
keen of Vorpaling at level 4 it is woohoo.
well, and the other thing to keep in mind, and we haven't discussed it yet, but I think we're probably near the place that you want to do that or have this conversation inserted into the notes. But because if you're TRing a lot, you're going to see a lot of low level items, right? you're going to want to take the opportunity to keep an eye out. Go ahead and search, even if you have like gear that you're always using in your TR passes, especially right now with the loot change. You want to keep an eye on what's new and what's going on, because you don't know what kind of weird thing that you're going to find that's just going to come out of nowhere and suddenly become that new go-to for you piece of gear.
Yeah, I find
I'm
that
trying to
that to be a less frequent occurrence than it does in Epic, but it can be no less earth shattering, right? Like,
Well, so like, let's pretend you do find something. I don't know if they still have burst, but something of the equivalent of burst of Keen on like a falchion, right? Now all of a sudden at level 4, that's insane. You,
Mhm.
you do something minor like put a um the critical effect from the Stone of Change, which is a crafting that we haven't really talked about yet. But you put that on there, then all of a sudden that thing goes insane. Or you put an Icy Festival burst on it from the winter event, and now every time you crit, and because you're on a falchion with Keen, you're critting on like a
15.
14 or 15 or
Yeah.
something. All of a sudden now you've added 10d6, or not 10d6, sorry, a d10 plus a d6 points of damage on top of your DPS all the time. At level 30, who cares? Like, that's nothing. But at level 10, when the monsters have 40 hit points, or level 4, where the monsters have 40 hit points, or even at level 7, where the monsters have 75 hit points, that's huge. That's a massive percentage.
The
So
I think
outliers
kind
are
of
super important.
to summarize kind of what you're saying there is at lower levels that +1 means more because you have fewer of them.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you want to take the time to read through those loot lists. You want to take the time to skim through the end rewards, because again, the gems are happening. The gems do drop, and they're not. And by gems, I don't mean a gem. I mean uh, a very good item.
Mhm.
Somebody out there is going to get that Vorpal Keen awesome weapon with 2 slots on it. Somebody's going to get it. It may be you. I hope it's me, but it could be you. But if you don't look for it, you won't find it. So you have to watch for that stuff, because I can't tell you how many items over the years have become doomsday weapons for TRing that
Yeah.
just kind of come out of nowhere.
I think that the other thing I want to kind of capture before we move on from reincarnation gearing philosophy is, uh, and you kind of have a different experience because you change your builds a lot more frequently.
Every life.
I don't, but I've kind of boiled it down to 3 kind of basic build types, and that's what I kind of look for gear for. Uh, and those 3 are two-handed fighting, uh,
Okay.
inquisitive,
Okay.
so kind of crossbowy, and then kind of a firecaster. Uh,
Let's
iterate.
just leave it at caster.
Yeah, I the reason why I put fire in there is kind of because I specifically tend to get look for fire sticks, or like the Sharn set that I use is fire based. Or to some extent, and there's a little bit more variation in that castery kind of part, right? Because it's a little more specific and in the weeds. Like there's a different. Some of them I use the esoteric set. Some of them I use the Flame Cleanse Fury set from Sharn, right? Depending on what
Right.
kind of armor I can use and what stat. And there's a little bit of variation in like intelligence versus charisma
Mhm.
versus wisdom, right? But generically, like those are kind of the 3 builds that I'm really kind of gearing towards. And I found that has worked really well for me because it's a little bit of a focusing effect, right? Like I can focus more in on what kind of gear I'm looking for. And there's some crossover as well, but like that's kind of been my strategy.
And I think that's a pretty valid strategy. Again, I kind of mentioned, um, if not this show, the previous shows, that especially if you're brand new or a returning player and you're kind of moving into this TR train, which again is what we're trying to focus on. Pick a couple of styles and flesh out the gear as you're going through your TR motions. Find gear along the way for those styles. And Patrick has outlined his 3 styles. Two-handed melee, um, inquisitive, so crossbows, and then in this case, a firecaster. Now, once you have those things down, you can you have 30 or 40 pieces of gear from level 1 to level 20 that you can tap into.
Mhm.
And maybe you set those gear changes for particular level watermarks, which is fine. Again, I personally love again, I think it's most fun to go hit the bank every time I level and be like, ooh. But that doesn't necessarily the thing for everybody, you know. Um, you can go back to the old style, as it were, of thinking armors and wearables are odd level or even levels, and gear and weapons are odd levels, or whichever way it was. Like you can look at that kind of stuff, but for me, it's a matter of trying to be flexible on builds, especially when it comes to things like casters. Like, do I want to be a DC based caster? So am I focusing on holds, PKs, firewall, like that kind of stuff? Or am I a blaster character?
Right.
And if so, what kind of style do I tap into most often? And for me, the reason I bring this up in particular is again to take this same mindset and apply it to the hardcore server, because I'm currently, I think, position 12 right now on the hardcore server. And the only reason I'm not higher is because I'm waiting to knock out a couple of raids, hopefully here in the over this weekend on the hardcore. And I will tell you right now, if you would like to have a lot of success on the hardcore server as a caster, you need to go watch my videos for playing a Pale Master Rogue on the hardcore. And you do that not just because of a lot of defenses built into that particular class combination, but because the gear that's easily available allows you to get more spell damage at the equivalent level to these other casters.
Right.
So, for example, an equivalent caster right now is going to have around 250 or maybe 275 on your spellcaster element for damage, right? So if you're a firecaster, you're going to be around 275, give or take at our approximate level. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on which gear sets you have and you've lucked into everything correctly. Right now on the hardcore server, I have 475 on my Pale Master. Plus, I can augment boost that up with a temporary item. So I'm already doing an like what? They double every 100. So I'm basically doing an extra set of dice over you because I'm doing negative energy damage instead of fire damage. And these are little things that are entirely based off of decisions of your style of
Right.
enjoying to play. You can cast Fireball on a group of undead and kill them. I have to spend 2 spells to do the same thing. Right? So it makes a big difference. Or I end up healing them. I can't tell you how many times I get yelled at because I'm going to kill this fleshy over here, and then I accidentally completely healed up this skeleton that's right next to it. And then I turn around and kill the skeleton. It's not a big deal. But I can't tell you how many times people have been upset with me about that.
Yeah.
But that's part of the style. But
Yeah.
because I'm going to do, 3,000 points of damage to that Reaper coming at me for 7 mana or whatever it is, 9 mana, and you're going to have to hit that thing 5 times to do the same amount of damage. Who would you rather have in the Reaper quest?
Sure.
So like these mindsets are really important as you start to figuring out what style you want to play and where you want to go. It I'm trying to figure out how to sum this up for you guys really easily. But worry about the key pieces of gear. There's going to be 4 or 5 or 6 pieces of gear that you're going to tap into every single life. Get those. Look at them, ask people, see what they say, and make those like your crutch. And then you can start worrying about, like, this is your core. These are your tier 1 things that come along. These are your 2-tier things that come along. And then you can worry about the tier 1 and the tier 2 things later. But figure out your core and get those as quickly as possible because you will use those so much.
Yeah. I think the 2 things I want to kind of capture when we're talking about reincarnation 2 before we move on is one, I think I mentioned this before. I can't remember if it was on the show or kind of conversation people were asking about how to go about TRing from kind of the beginning stages of TRing. And I would say when you're talking about getting into the reincarnation business, kind of from a very early stage, when you have a lot of options to like what kind of builds, if you're trying to get completionist and you're going to try to go through all these different classes, right? I would suggest look at the gear you have currently and maybe pick something to start with that is more well supported with the gear you currently have. And while you're playing those builds that are kind of more supported with what you have, you can collect the gear for those other builds that you want to get to, right?
Yeah, that's an amazing point that I actually hadn't thought of until you said. I mean, I've thought of it before, but I hadn't thought of it for this
Yeah.
conversation, which is really is a great point.
Because there's a lot of builds that you see that are reincarnating. That, oh man, that build looks fantastic, and that one's just like burning through content literally. And then you go and try it, but because you don't have the gear to support it, you don't have that same experience, and then you get disillusioned by kind of that build, and maybe you don't want to go back to it, or you find you didn't really enjoy it. So allow the gear that you do have to maybe help inform what your next reincarnation is going to look like.
That is really good advice. I would also add real fast as an extra input to that, the universal enhancement tree lines, they add a lot, so it's really easy to have different classes or different styles. Patrick mentioned inquisitive a little bit ago. Inquisitive, for example, can pretty much carry almost any class combination.
Yep.
And can carry you through. So, like, if you say you really dislike warlocks, I'm not going to tell you that having a warlock life that's an inquisitive is going to be out of this world, but you're going to be able to get through the quests on elite or Reaper 1 without too much work, assuming that you have a good ghost touch crossbows and you put 41 points in the inquisitive tree. You're going to be able to take that build and shoehorn it through the life because of the universal tree. I feel like you can do the same thing with daggers and crossbows right now, because those two universal trees are very strong, and that's a way to get around, pseudo get around, doing classes or builds that you don't really love using the universal trees. And those are also good things to like look for and acquire on your leveling up process.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I kind of look at it from, like, when I talk about the 3 builds that I kind of utilize for reincarnation, they're very generic and they're not class specific. So you can kind of get through just about anything. The other thing I want to kind of capture a little bit is, be careful about holding on to too much gear. I think it's kind of the foundational part of it. Your mileage on this is going to vary a lot based on, one, what's your TRing path, right? If you're not getting Coin Lord and House K favor every time, you're going to have less room on your character to go into that reincarnation cache. Similarly speaking, depending on how much space you have in your shared bank, I am terrible at this. I have a feeling Samus is a lot better at it, but I have. Well, no, let me say what I'm saying.
No, I'm terrible at it. I see where you're going. I'm terrible at it.
My shared bank probably has about 180 slots taken up by like consumable stuff that I'm terrible at using.
Oh, okay,
so
never mind.
It really reduces it reduces the amount of space I have to throw stuff into my reincarnation cache to use for into my shared bank to use for, as like overflow for reincarnation cache. So my takeaway from that, me personally, is I'm a little bit more conscientious of how much gear I'm holding on to, right? Like I may find like, oh hey, this ring is an upgrade. This is a level 6 upgrade to my level 5 ring. Well, do I really need that extra 6 spell power is not worth it to me to hold on to an extra item and take up an extra slot in my reincarnation cache that I have to empty and go through kind of this whole rigmarole.
Right. So, again, another excellent point. I will tell you guys right now that I have unlocked every purchasable gear slot that you can have in your backpack, in your house K bank. I make sure that I go through and get my coin lord favors, and I make sure that I always go get my house K favors. You're right; it does change your play to make sure that you get through those. And I will tell you that I have purchased, like I said before, I think either I have all of them or I'm one short of all of the possible shared banks. And I also have, as I'm currently the leader of the defense guild, and I have both chests, right? That's where I put the consumables. I have switched away from using bound to character consumables. So I will spend more plat each life to maintain curse removal potions, etc., etc., just so I have the ability to turn around and put them into the guild chests for the 20 minutes it takes for me to TR.
Yeah.
Okay? That's just how it is. That's just a fact. Not everybody has to go through that rigmarole. I will tell you on the flip side, Guildies, Tobrel, and Distributed, they were both just as hard on the TR grind as I was. They actually picked up a bunch of autos boxes and knocked it the rest of the way out just recently.
Which I will say, in the same vein, does really change that pathing, because then you skip that coin lord and house K favor and changes that metric all of a sudden.
Correct. So they actually, because of that pathing change, right, they actually ended up really deeply cutting the stuff that they had in their backpack. They basically made sure that no matter what they possibly had, it could either fit in the shared bank or fit in their backpack and bank. They cut. So like all the old raid items that they used occasionally and it was like nice or whatever, cut. Everything's gone. They bare bones hacked super tightly through everything, which for me that would be a nightmare, because I switch my builds around so much that like, oh man, you know what? I really wish I had that belt of Titan strength. I'm really unhappy that I threw it away. You know what I mean? Like those are things that really, really happened to me.
That's why I narrowed my focus down to 3 builds, right? Because I figured I can take those 3 builds and I can do any class race combination out of one of those 3 builds.
You can. You really can. But then for me on the flip side, I don't have 13 characters sitting at cap to enjoy all these different styles like you.
Yeah.
Right? So if someone's like, "Hey Samus, what do you think of 2-weapon fighting and paladins right now?" You know what I had to do? I had to TR. I had to play one. I'm like, well, in theory, blah 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 blah. But have I done one? I didn't. So guess what? 2 lives ago I did one. And you know what? They're really good.
Yeah.
You should be you should be using your SOS and swinging around two-handed fighting weapon. Don't screw around with this board and sword nonsense. Get over that. You know what I mean? But I couldn't have told you that before I experienced it myself.
Yeah. Also, Black Razor instead of Sword of Shadows.
Black Razor is also fine. It's fine. It's good at level 9, which is why you have one at level 9, and you go check and make sure. But if you have your level 10 SOS, big crits, baby. Big crits all day.
I'm a fan of the big numbers too. That's But I will always perceive myself as doing more damage when I see bigger numbers than.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if your consistency is different.
Yeah, I'm probably doing less damage, but those big numbers make me feel real good.
I mean, it's the string Tom philosophy, right? And I think he did the best job I've ever heard of someone summing it up. If you can walk into a thing and see 5 monsters there, and you kill one with the first hit, you're going to feel really good about yourself and how much longer it takes for you to kill the other 4 guys. Because that first guy just, bam, is out of there. You don't have to worry about him anymore. I'm like, you know what? You put it like that. That does feel real good. Like, maybe I do want that great axe. Doesn't happen every time, but...
All right, I think where we're at, we'll do another cut here, and then we'll do another part, and we're gonna get specific in the next section. So we're gonna hopefully this kind of more theory and kind of bigger picture has been helpful. But I know we've mentioned a few specifics. We're gonna get really into the specifics and kind of hit some highlights. So do you want to plug some stuff?
Yeah. So I mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again. I'm going to mention it until it happens. But I'm trying to hit that 1,000 follower watermark on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Samius Gurobo. I'd really appreciate if you guys would do me the solid and visiting there and giving that a subscription. You don't have to follow or actually watch or do anything there yet, but it's good. But I would really appreciate that. You can also watch me live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Samius Gurobo. My Twitter is also twitter.com/Samius Gurobo. My Facebook is youtube.com or facebook.com/Samius Gurobo. However you want to watch and enjoy the stream, I'm there. I do my best to monitor all the chats. I answer questions. I do all the things. Here in the very near future, I'll be having a new series on YouTube. So I want to kind of pre-pump that. So if you're a new player or returning player, it'll be focused towards you. But hopefully I'll have some good tips in there for existing players as well. So yeah, please check that kind of stuff out for the future. It's not just all vlogs. It's not just all build videos. It's not just all guides. I'm also trying to rearrange and increase more stuff to go even into more depth for conversations like Patrick and I have had.
These in-depth ones are fun, right? Like,
well,
I get so caught up in having fun with doing it. I mean, geez,
I feel like every time that you invite me onto one of these streams, you're like, this is what I need. It's going to be like a slow month for DDOCast. So what I need is Samus involved. If I can get Samus to talk about a subject that he actually cares about, I can get 3 or 4 episodes out of the conversation easy.
We're gonna go through 4. This is gonna end up probably being the longest recording session that I've ever done for DDOCast, actually. So
I'm loving it.
And a big thanks to Samus, and thanks to Arkat too, who had to go kind of in the middle of the discussion today because we've been going for so long.
That's the first time I've got to meet Arkat face to face, as it were.
Yeah. Hey, if you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO, you'd like to be featured on our website, let me know. If you can hit us up at DDOCast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. And if you want to be part of the show or have a comment on this episode, join the discussion. Leave a comment or email us at ddocast@gmail.com. I'm really hoping we're gonna get a lot of fun comments on this one as well. This could be a fun fan feedback section as well. I'm looking forward to that. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your tests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather from us.